Hi, I'm Lyndon Leggett and I'm founder of the AWS DeepRacer community, and I'm also an AWS machine learning hero. Today I'm going to show you how to upgrade your existing AWS car with an Evo kit that adds a Lidar and stereo cameras. Watch me as we follow along and attach each item and upgrade the firmware so you too can start head-to-head and object avoidance racing.
Okay, so let's get started. So what I've got in front of me on the table here is the Evo upgrade pack and an existing AWS DeepRacer car. Now this car has already been set up with Wi-Fi and initial configuration. So if you haven't already done that, you need to go off and follow those instructions first. This video is going to focus purely on how to actually upgrade the hardware and add on the new components that come with the Evo pack, and then upgrade the firmware with the right drivers to support that new hardware. So what we've got with an Evo upgrade pack is the new shell. As you can see, the new shell has a wider opening in the front to support both cameras. It's also got a hole on the top, which is to support the Lidar, giving visibility. You'll also notice that the shell is very slightly higher at the front than on the original car. I'm not entirely sure if that's just for good looks, but as far as I'm aware, there isn't a significant change in behaviour as a result of that. In the upgrade pack, we've also got the Lidar. The Lidar spins around and at 10 frames per second will detect the distance of any object within 12 metres. And that gives a good input to the car to see anything that's approaching from behind and allowing it to manoeuvre, for example, to block another vehicle that's trying to pass. Now in the pack, the Lidar actually comes pre-attached to a new bracket, so it's mostly fitting that new bracket that we're going to be focusing on in this video today. We also have a second camera that comes with it. This is exactly the same as the existing camera in the original car. We then got a couple of cables, one longer one that has a micro USB on the end, and then a USB extender cable. We're actually going to use both of those, although the extender one isn't an official upgrade step. It is based upon my experience of using the car so far, and in fact some of the things I'm going to show you are little tips and tricks, but essentially the steps are the same. We also have in the pack a little bag of extra screws. We don't actually need these as part of the upgrade. These are really just spares in case you happen to lose any, so we'll put those to the side for now. Also in the box of upgrades is a spare set of pins. As you'll see on the car, these hold the shell and the frame and to the chassis, but again I've got a full set here, so we don't need any. If you need some spares, they're included in the back. And then finally there's this piece of rubber. Not entirely sure what it's for. It's got a sticky back on it. The guide doesn't tell us actually what this is going to be used for, and it isn't necessary as far as I can tell. I'm sure we'll work out in due course what it actually does, but for the moment I'm going to put that to the side. The final thing in the pack is a fairly standard screwdriver with a cross tip on the end. We're going to be using this to loosen a couple of screws to attach the new bracket to the car. Okay, so let's get started. So first of all, I'm just going to put the new shell to the side to give me some more space. Everything I'm going to take you through is actually included on a PDF guide on the AWS website. So in your box you will have a little card like this that has a little bit of information about the Evo upgrade pack. If you just simply go to the URL at the bottom of that card, you will see a PDF that steps you through all the steps I'm going to be showing you now. So first things first is with the current car, we need to take off the shell just by simply pulling out the 4 pins that hold it in place, and then lift that off gently and put it to the side. We're not going to need that again as part of the Evo upgrade, but of course should you ever wish to actually put the car back to being a single camera, no Lidar, then you will need the components we're going to be removing. Now you'll see on this car that I've actually set this car up in the way I use it at my events. So I run machine learning training events using DeepRacer, and in those events we have a number of cars and we have to actually turn them around quite quickly to get as many people onto the track. Normally the battery, the drive battery, is officially meant to be sit down in the bottom in a little pouch, a little compartment that has a little Velcro strap. To get to that, you have to remove these pins, and that takes too much time. So most people who are running actual racing events mount the battery on top, either underneath the Velcro strap, or in some of the newer models there is a rubber holder for that. Now, the problem with the Evo is that this is exactly where the Lidar is going to sit, so we have to find a new home for that later on. So for the moment we'll just remove that battery to the side. We will need that to test things in a little while. And then we also want to disconnect the compute battery cable should you have it already connected. So just put that to the side for the moment. Now within this then, you'll see in the original car there is a strap. Now if you look at the guide for Evo, it does leave this in place. But actually I'm going to recommend that you remove this strap because you'll see it makes it a lot easier to slide out this battery once we've got the new bracket and shell for the Lidar on top. So simply pull the strap apart and just slide it out from underneath. And again, put that to the side in case you ever want to put this back. And that is important for keeping the battery in when the car is in normal mode. But as you'll see, once we put the bracket on top for the Lidar, that is actually going to encase that battery and keep it nice and secure. So we don't need the Velcro strap. Okay, now within this then, the first step to upgrade is actually to remove the current brackets that support the shell. So there's two of those, there's one at the back and then one at the front here as well. They are actually attached to the frame, to the body, using two little screws, one on each bracket. These loosen very easily with the screwdriver, but you might find the car bounces a little bit from its suspension when doing so. So if you just remove those. Now the upgrade pack that I have received, courtesy of Amazon, actually has these screws pre-attached to the new frame, which is really handy. There are also spares of these in the bag, but it's good practice to keep these just in case you want to put these original brackets and reattach them to make it a single camera car. You'll obviously need these screws to reattach the brackets at that point. But for now, as part of this, we're not going to need them again. These brackets then just slide up on both the front and the back. And what you'll see in these brackets is that there are four essentially pillars, two on each, that slide into some holes on the frame of the car. So two holes and then the screw attachment just in front of it. And these are exactly the same holes that the new Lidar frame is going to sit into. But for the original brackets, we're just going to put them to one side because we're not going to need them again as part of an Evo car. So the next step is to attach the Lidar. And as I say, the Lidar comes pre-attached to a new bracket frame, and you'll see on here we have exactly the same four pillars that will slide into those holes. And again, the two screws you're going to need to use to attach it are fitted to the frame, and in fact, as you can see, they don't fall out, which is really handy because that's going to make it a lot easier to stop losing them in the future. At the moment, I'll just show you on the side here is a USB socket. We'll be using that in a little while to attach the Lidar into the compute module. So orientating the brackets so that you've got the tool end towards the end with the camera and the sort of pointed end towards the back of the car. Simply slide it in place, making sure those four pillars align with the four sockets that you would have had exposed by removing those last brackets. Make sure it's in nicely. It doesn't need a lot of force or anything else. It should slide in simply, so make sure you don't break it. Now we need to screw this back into the frame of the car, just like we did in reverse for removing the old brackets. Your car Lidar bracket may come actually with this metal piece attached to it, and actually that is blocking the screw we need to get to. But this simply unscrews with your fingers. It doesn't need to be done too tightly. So we just unwind that, put it to the side. We will need that again in a moment, and lift up that metal plate. You'll see we can now get to the screw on the back of the bracket. So taking your screwdriver, simply tighten that. It doesn't need to be overly tightened. You don't want to break the thread or anything, but it needs to be secure enough to keep the bracket in place. The one at the front is a little bit more fiddly because it's down the back of both the battery and the Lidar. So make sure you get the right thing and then tighten that up. Good, and that's now attached to the car. Pretty simple, huh? Okay, so the next step then is that we need to actually connect the Lidar to the USB ports on the car. Now you'll see in the car that before upgrade, you've got the camera attached into these things here. We need to remove that and give it a good wobble, and you'll see actually it's just a standard USB camera, but it's fit into a nice shell. Behind it are 3 USB sockets. We're actually going to be using those for attaching the 2 cameras and the Lidar. So the left and the right sockets will be used to take the cameras, and the center one will be taken and be used for attaching the Lidar connectivity. So taking the cable that has the micro USB end on it and the standard USB at the other end, push it into the center socket, making sure obviously you get it orientated the right way, and then bring it to the side and actually then slide it into the socket that we showed you earlier on the back of the Lidar. Now, once attached, this is going to have everything in place. Just get that into there. Obviously, you shouldn't need to put too much force into these. Okay, so that's that now connected. So taking your original camera, put it in one of the sockets either side. These just slide down and you should have a little sort of clunk as it goes in. Make sure it is in firmly, otherwise it won't read the signal and the car won't operate properly. On your new camera, you may find it has this little protective film on the front, so simply pull that up to remove it, because obviously we don't want to obscure the picture. And again, this is exactly the same. So pushing the Lidar cable just to the side, slide in the second camera into its hole, and there we go, clunks in nicely. Now this cable needs to just sit behind the cameras so it doesn't then get in the way. And as you can see, that works quite nicely in the process there. So we're almost there. There's a couple more things we need to do. First of all, I'm just going to show you the benefit of removing that strap. So when you're running a big event, the compute battery would normally last maybe say about 4 hours, 3 or 4 hours, and after which it needs to be replaced. Obviously the drive batteries last about 15 minutes, so they need to be replaced more frequently. But in this position, without the strap, we can now actually slide out the compute battery and then switch it up with a new, fresh, fully charged battery and back into the same slot. And again, make sure it goes back. Now, when you're sliding back in, you'll probably find the battery just very slightly catches this cable on the Lidar. So just lift it up, make sure you don't break it, and then slide the battery back as far as it will go. Perfect. As you can see, the actual frame of the bracket is keeping that nice and secure, acting in exactly the same way as the strap did before. So while we're here, you can also see at the front of the car there's another USB socket. Now this is typically used for loading your models onto the car before racing. It gets a little bit fiddly to use, which is why this I like to use this USB extender cable just to bring that to the side. So if we just take that cable and plug it in, there we go. As you can see now, it's a lot more accessible for us to be able to actually quickly push in a USB stick and load onto a model. And it also means now that actually we can sit our battery just behind, on top of that, in front of the compute battery. And although it's not entirely secure, it's a reasonable place to compensate for quickly changing it without having to put it into its proper home at the bottom. Now, to help that a little bit more, we can put back on this metal bracket. Depending upon the battery you have in your car, you might find that the Dell batteries come a little bit further out, in which case this might not work. So you may still have to put it into the side in an original cradle, but for me, with this Asus battery, it fits quite nicely. So taking the little black-headed screw, we can just spin that around and hold that in place. And actually this is going to stop both the drive battery and the compute battery sliding forwards should we have, sliding backwards, should we have a big impact on the car. So next up we have to attach the compute battery. So simply take the USB cable and slide that into the battery, and we therefore have a upgraded car. So don't forget to connect the drive battery into its cable as well. Obviously taking care to make sure that this isn't going to sit on the side and drag on the wheels once we put it into there. So the way I do that is just by hooking that behind one of these bracket supports that keeps it up nicely. Now we need to just test everything. There's two ways of testing that. First of all, just to make sure that the drive battery is connected okay. So as you would do with the original car, you have a little switch down the back here, if I can find it. That helps us then actually check, and if it turns on, here it is, just behind the wheel there, it should do a double beep, and that means the battery is charged and is connected into the vehicle. Okay, so we'll turn that off now, so we don't need that for the moment, but we will need it in a little while. The second thing to check is to make sure that everything with the Lidar has been connected properly. So simply turn on the compute battery by pressing the button on the battery itself to wake it up. You should see a series of LEDs on there indicating how much charge the battery has, and then on the car itself press the power button, which sits just down here. Now that should take a few seconds to warm up, but the first thing you should notice is that the Lidar on the top is now spinning around, and there's a little LED underneath it. In my case it's green, that's lighting up, showing that actually there we go, you can see it now, showing that the Lidar is fully connected to the compute. In a moment, once the car has fully booted up, the LED in the car itself should light up, and the colour of this will depend upon how you've configured it in your vehicle. This one is set to be blue, but really it doesn't matter too much as long as it is displaying something. So give that a moment or two, and that just shows that everything has successfully booted up with the car itself. Any moment now, it should go blue. So while we're waiting for that, the final step will be to reattach the shell of the car. There we go, it's now gone blue, which means in my case that is fully set up. The colour, as I say, could be anything different depending upon how you configured that through the car's interface, which we'll show you next. So that's all set up, so we can actually turn that off. So just simply turn off the car on the side. But you know what, I'm going to leave it on for the next step of the video. Now, taking the shell and simply slide it over the top, obviously taking care with the Lidar that you don't catch that. And then simply slide it in over those 4 pillars, and then using exactly the same screws as you had before, just slide them through the little holes in each pillar, and that will secure the shell to the chassis itself. One up here, final one on this side. And there you have it. That is how to upgrade your DeepRacer car with an Evo accessory pack in the process. So the next step is now to actually upgrade the firmware and just do a test through the console, and that will help us see the picture from both cameras and take it for a little test drive. So let's move to the console. Okay, so the next step is to actually just check the car is working properly and make sure the firmware is on the right version that supports the Lidar and the stereo cameras. So opening up your browser, you need to go to the IP address for your car. Now again, I've already set up my car to be on my Wi-Fi, and I know the IP address for it. If you haven't already set up your car, you need to go and follow the getting started steps in the AWS guide on the website. So going to opening a browser, you will probably see a little SSL error. It's fine to ignore that and proceed. Now you need to type in the password. Again, you should be familiar with this, but on the bottom of your car there is a little sticker that will have a password on there. In my case, I've actually changed it to something else to make it a little bit more memorable. So let's just type that in. Okay, so when you log in, hopefully you should be presented with a prompt that tells you the software is needing to be updated. It's possible that actually if you go to settings and scroll to the bottom, it tells you you're on the latest version and that actually the latest version is something which is older than we know to be the current one. Now occasionally the cars can lose some of their connectivity and in fact you may even have to manually upgrade the car. And we've got a guide on the community wiki that takes you through this process. So if you go down to here, there's a section on setting up your car, and then there is a troubleshooting, and then there is I cannot upgrade, and in here are some steps. In particular, fixing the DNS is a simple step that gets you the connectivity normally, allowing you to automatically upgrade the car through the console. But if not, here are the steps to actually do a full manual upgrade. In our case, we're lucky enough that actually it has detected the upgrade is available. So you just simply need to tap Update Software, and this is going to take the latest version from the AWS servers, put it down to the car, and actually get those drivers installed, allowing us to actually start racing models that have been built with the Lidar stereo cameras. And this will take a minute or two to update, and the car will probably restart in the process. So we'll just speed this up to make it a little bit more efficient for you to watch. Okay, so the installation of the software is complete. It's now going to restart the car, and in the process you should notice the LED at the back of the car turning off, and the Lidar will temporarily stop spinning just as it goes through a power cycle. Give it a few seconds and both of those should return, initially with the Lidar, and then the LED in the back of the car will turn back on once the operating system is fully loaded and the DeepRacer software is running. This will take approximately a minute, so I'll just speed that up for you. Okay, now the LED has come back on. It should be almost ready for us to check. You may need to refresh in your browser to get back to the console. And there we go, we can see it's now on the latest version, which at the time of filming is 1.0.514.0. So let's go back to the console, and now we should have the ability to actually see our car and control it through a manual test. So there's lots of models on here that I've preloaded on this car previously. Now let's have a little look then with one of the new default models that comes with the car itself. So I've just loaded the Lidar model, and that will take approximately 30 seconds for it to load onto the car and be ready to drive with. Obviously very risky that the car drives off the table, so you would have in your box a little roll of tape. Now officially that's for actually making your own track on the floor, but this is the perfect prop to actually put underneath your car to stop it actually driving off and damaging itself. So now the wheels are nice and clear of the table. Okay, so as we can see, it hasn't worked. We should be seeing some extra controls that allow you to select the Lidar being on and off. but that doesn't appear to be showing for the moment for some reason.
Okay, so I figured out what the problem is. Basically, in my car, one of the cameras wasn't quite settled into the USB socket. So if you get the same issue where none of the video screen feed is showing in the console, do make sure you give each of those cameras a good push down to make sure they're firmly seated, and then restart the car by touching the restart button on the side. And hopefully, when it does, you'll see the console as we can see it here. So when you log in and you finish with the upgrade, you'll be presented with the option to control the vehicle. Now you'll see a new change to the console. No longer is it just a single camera on and off. We have toggles for the stereo camera and the Lidar. And as you can see, the car has detected that we actually have stereo cameras available and the Lidar, but not the single camera. And that's obviously because we don't have a camera in the middle of the port, and we actually have the Lidar connected into there. So if we turn on the stereo camera, you'll see that there is a single video feed feeding through to the console, giving you an idea of what the car is seeing. And if we turn on the Lidar, you'll see an overlay on top, a little sort of triangular grid system that gives you an idea, if I put my hand behind it, where vehicles are detected in that grid. Which is pretty neat to be able to test that the Lidar is actually feeding back as you expect it to into the vehicle. So give that a little try and make sure it's all working for you, and then you can go through your usual process of calibrating the car. And there isn't any new settings for the Lidar or the stereo cameras, so it's simply steering and speed, and this works exactly as it did in the original car. And then when you've got that on, you can then give the car a little try on a track. Now I'm going to do that in a future video. I've got a couple of wide tracks. We're going to do a little demonstration with some object avoidance and possibly even head-to-head racing. But for now, hopefully you found that useful in seeing how to actually upgrade your car with the full Evo pack and get to a point where you can start racing it on your own track. Any questions? Of course, reach out to us in the DeepRacer community on Slack, and we'll be sure to help you out wherever we can. Thanks a lot. Speak to you soon.